Bien, ya estamos de regreso y vamos a dar inicio a la primera ponencia de esta mañana. Y nosotros les contábamos que la Corporación de la Carne posee un rol de carácter técnico y sectorial. Estamos convencidos que una producción ganadera que apunte a la sustentabilidad debe combinar las propias capacidades y avances locales con la experiencia enriquecedora de instituciones internacionales prestigiosas en temas de mutuo interés. Es este énfasis que hemos realizado durante los 2 días de jornada en el ámbito de un sistema de producción más que temas específicos para no perder el contexto global que involucra la ganadería. De este modo, no solo se articulan acciones de cambio, sino que también se da paso a actividades muy preciadas al incentivar la generación de redes fraternales de largo plazo. Es por ello que hoy contamos con la participación de Quality Meat Scotland, institución escocesa que posee programas y una visión tremendamente interesante para el crecimiento y posicionamiento de la ganadería y las carnes. Por eso nos sentimos honrados como corporación de dejar con ustedes al señor Alan Clarke, gerente general de Quality Meat Scotland, quien realizará la primera de 3 ponencias temáticas titulada Esto es Quality Meat Scotland. Adelante, Alan, cuando usted lo estime conveniente.
Thank you very much indeed, Veronica, for the introduction, and thank you very much for the invite along to your conference today. I hope you have a very successful rest of the day. It gives me a great opportunity today to be joined by 2 of my colleagues, Sarah Miller, who is our Director of Market Intelligence and External Affairs. Sarah will be giving you a little bit more information about what we do to protect the sector and also some of the work that we're doing around some of the current initiatives of COP26 and so on. Also joined by Leslie Cameron, who is our Director of Marketing and Comms. And Leslie will be giving you a little bit more information about the things that we do in relation to the marketing and also how we protect the sector as well. Now, Scotland is a very small country. We have 5.5 million people. We call ourselves a wee country, which is a small country in proper English. But we're delighted that we have a fantastic worldwide reputation, and that's a big reputation around the world. Scotland's famous for a number of things, and it's famous for its bagpipes. You may be familiar with that. It's also famous for its kilts and men that wear kilts. We also have tartan, which is sold all over the world, and we have very famous for our highlands and islands, and also for the number of castles around Scotland as well. And I'm just going to stop for a second. Veronica, can I ask you to check, are my slides in sync with my presentation? Veronica, can you hear me?
Yes,
Are my slides
I'm not if you can hear me, Alan?
Yes, I can hear you, Veronica. Are my slides in sync with my presentation?
Yeah, I can see them properly. Yeah. Sí.
No, that's fine.
Una intervención para los auditores. Simplemente recordar que aquellas personas que deseen escuchar la charla del señor Clarke en español tienen que entrar a la sala que está indicada como traducción para que puedan escuchar entonces la charla en el idioma español, solo como tip adicional. Muchas gracias.
Is that okay to go ahead, Veronica?
Yes.
Okay, thank you very much. Sorry about that. So, Scotland is a very small country, but it has an international reputation for many things. This includes our old town in Edinburgh, which were probably some of the first skyscrapers, buildings that are 7 stories high, that were built within Europe. We have a little drink that you might be familiar with called whiskey. We say that you have a little dram of whiskey, and it's something, again, which travels internationally extremely well. We have very famous Highland cattle, or as they call them in Scotland, coos, and also something which I know you're familiar with as well, and that is the fantastic Aberdeen Angus breed that we have here in Scotland, which also has travelled all over the world as well. Something I'm not so sure if you're aware of, a little thing called haggis, which is an absolute delicacy here in Scotland. But there's one thing which is also very elusive here in Scotland, but something that we're very proud of, and that is the Loch Ness Monster. And the Loch Ness Monster has, again, a fantastic story to tell. It has brought millions of visitors to Scotland. And one of the things that Scotland is really good at is punching above its weight. We're a small country, but this international reputation that we have precedes us. And that's something that we try then to bring into the business world. And yes, and we're here today talking about quality, but also we are a land of food and drink. And we work with other partners in Scotland and to make sure that we're working in partnership. So whether we're trying to sell into local markets, into national markets, or into international markets, that we also have a collective and a joined up approach to working together. You know, farming, fishing, food and drink, it's Scotland's most valuable industry. And what we want to be recognised, both in Scotland and internationally, as a world leader in responsible, profitable growth. Our industry is worth now, it's actually just over 15 billion a year. And over the last 3 years, we've been averaging about 6% increase year on year. And exports are very important to Scotland. And whether that's the quality meat that we have, or whether that's Scottish salmon, or whether that's Scottish whisky, langoustines, and so on, but that's 6.3 billion. And again, with a growth rate of almost 5% year on year. So the partners that we work with other organisations, Scottish Salmon, Scottish Whisky, Scottish Bakers, Seafood Scotland, all of these key organisations that are private sector. But we also work with organisations who are public sector. And that could be organisations like Scottish Government, Scottish Enterprise, Highlands and Islands Enterprise. And this is really a unique partnership of private sector organisations and public sector organisations who come together. So where does the red meat industry fit into this? Red meat industry fits in extremely well. If we look at the Scottish red meat industry in 2020, we're supporting 50,000 jobs here in Scotland, and we're contributing 2 billion annually to the Scottish economy. Now, those are big numbers, and that means that we are a priority sector for Scottish Government. But if you look at the overall production within Scotland, total Scottish beef production is annually 165,000. Lamb production, 26,000. Pork production, 31,000. And then if we look as a percentage of UK production, we're then looking at 18.1% of the total UK production for beef in Scotland, 8.5% for lamb, and 3.2% for pork. So not massive numbers, but if we start to take that out onto a world stage and look at the total Scottish production as a percentage of world production, the beef production in Scotland is 0.28% of the world. Lamb, 0.27%, and Scottish pork, 0.03%. Now, those are absolutely tiny numbers. And I started off saying that Scotland is a wee country. It is a small country. But you think of the reputation that Scotch beef has, Scotch lamb has across the world. So we've been very lucky that we have been punching above our weight for the total amount of production that we actually produce annually. So Quality Meat Scotland, who are we and what's our role within it? We are a non-departmental public body. We're part of Scottish Government. We're funded by farmers and processors. So we're very unusual. Although we are an arm of government, we actually aren't funded by government. We're funded by the private sector. We're very small. We've got 29 employees. The full-time equivalent is 25. And a small turnover. We turn over £7.5 million sterling per annum. Now, we have what we call a unique footprint because we work right across the sector, whether that is farmers, whether that is the abattoirs and processors, but we also work with the feed suppliers, with the auction marts, with the hauliers, with vets, butchers, retailers, food service providers, chefs. And the reason why we do that is to try and get a return on investment back to the farmers and the primary processors, the abattoirs, who actually pay the levy. So if we look at that, for every cattle, every sheep, every pig that is processed in Scotland, the farmer and the abattoir pay a levy to QMS. Now that levy is variable. For cattle, the farmer pays £4.20, processor £1.30, a total of £5.50 when the cattle, and the levy is collected at the point of slaughter. Sheep, 80 pence, and pig, £1.26. And when all that money is added up together, that rolls up to just about £5 million a year that we use. And the other 2 million from our turnover comes in from our quality assurance schemes and also from other work that we are successful doing in getting money from governments and so on. Now, what we try to do with that money is very simple. We want to be recognised by our stakeholders as the leadership organisation for the Scottish red meat industry. And we do 4 things. We develop the industry, we support the industry, we promote it, and we protect it, because we want it to be profitable and we want it to be sustainable for the long term. Now, I'm going to take you through our strategy, and I'll cover each of the areas. But my colleagues, Leslie and Sarah, will actually cover much more about how we promote the industry and much more about how we protect the industry. And I will focus on the first 2 of how we support it and how we develop it. So we're trying to get a Scottish red meat supply chain that is confident about investing in its future. I'm not sure how things are in Chile, but we have a very difficult supply chain. And very often, if farmers are making money, then processors aren't making money, and vice versa. We also have a UK home market, which is dominated by large retailers. And those large retailers are all about providing cheap food. And when you produce very high quality food, there is a cost to be able to do that. So in many supermarkets in the UK, meat is used as a loss leader. So it's sold under the cost of production. And that is a real concern for us going forward. But what that has meant is that farmers and processors have also been looking at wider markets. And how can we invest in, whether it's the butchery sector, in the food service sector, in exports, and other types of markets which aren't just fully dependent on the supermarkets. But the sheer volume that the supermarkets buy means that they're a very important part of the supply chain. We also, we would like to have an equity within the supply chain, because we're very simple. If you do not run a profitable business, you will not invest in it. It's as simple as that. And if we can make sure that the supply chain is equitable and each part of that supply chain is getting a fair return, that means that could lead very much to a sustainable future. And a personal one for us, we want the vast majority of the meat that is processed here in Scotland to carry our quality standards. And those quality standards are Scotch beef, PGI, Scotch lamb, PGI, and specially selected pork. Now that PGI is a European indication, and it's really a trademark. It's a slightly higher version of a trademark, but it's recognised in Europe as something that nobody else can call it Scotch beef unless it has been born, reared, and processed in Scotland. And that is part of the quality that we do, and that quality underpins everything that we do here in Scotland. And really what we want to do is to grow the value of our brands and to make sure that they're increasing in the eyes of customers and future customers. You'll hear a lot more from Leslie later on about, we've done a 180-degree turn in our marketing strategy in the last 18 months. And rather than targeting people who were traditionally buying our products that tended to be an older demographic, we are now targeting 18 to 39-year-olds. And we're trying to speak to those 18 and 39-year-olds in a language that they understand. And we're trying to use marketing techniques primarily based around social media, which is another language that they understand as well. As QMS, we have a very strong governance structure, and we want to make sure that farmers, processors, and companies right across our footprint have the opportunity to have a say in our strategy, and in how, in the what we actually do. We have our board. Our board are all people who work in the sector. They're all volunteers, and they all do it on a part-time basis. So the board is actually selected by Scottish Government, so they volunteer to apply for the role, and they can sit on our board for a period of 4 years and maximum period of twice, so a maximum of 8 years. But what we also have then is a number of groups. So we have our marketing groups, which look at the beef and lamb sectors, marketing and butchery. We have our industry development groups, which look at cattle, sheep and livestock. And we have our red meat resilience group. And that's where we bring all the key decision makers together of the different key stakeholder organizations. So the organizations that represent farmers, that represent beef, that represent pork, represent sheep. Also organizations that represent the processing sector, the auction mart sector, the haulage sector, and so on. And they come together and we try to look at non-competitive things that we can do together on behalf of the interests of the Scottish red meat industry. And that's one of the things, for example, whether it's trying to talk positively about red meat or responding to industry consultations that are put out by government. We also have what we call standard setting bodies, because everything that we do in the red meat in the red meat production system within Scotland is all based on standards. And we were the pioneers of quality assurance standards 30 years ago. And we're very proud of those standards, and we're continually looking at ways of building on them and improving on them. And we have separate standards that farmers must work to for cattle and sheep, for pigs, and also the hauliers, the livestock hauliers, the abattoirs, the processors, the auction marts, the feed companies, and they must work to those standards on a consistent basis. So what does success look like for QMS? I will go through the support and develop the industry. And later on today, you'll hear a little bit more on the promote and the protection side of the industry. So what do we do to support it? I mentioned our quality assurance. And as well as being a non-departmental public body, we are also a membership organisation. And we have more than 10,000 members in Scotland who voluntarily pay to be part of this quality assurance system. 9,640 are cattle and sheep farmers, 147 are pigs. And as you can see from the screen, we have feed merchants, we have haulage, livestock haulage companies, auction marts, and abattoirs, who are the processors that are here. Now, if you're not quality assured, you cannot use our brands. You cannot say that your product is Scotch beef PGI, Scotch lamb PGI, or specially selected pork. Okay, so that has to stay. If those standards aren't met, and you're assessed on an annual basis, and those standards are pretty strict, and we want to be a leader in animal welfare here in Scotland. So every year the standards are reviewed, and we produce new sets of standards. We try to make them very user-friendly. That farmers can find it quite easy to use them with templates and so on within them. And we review them every year, but every 2 years they get a substantial review. So every 2 years, substantial review, and the interim year is an interim review to make sure that we're up to date with any legislative changes and so on. Other things that we do then as well to support the industry. We have a very small health and education team, 2 people, and because of the pandemic, they previously have been going into and into schools and trying to encourage home economics teachers to make sure that the pupils that they were teaching understood where their food came from. With COVID, we weren't able to do that anymore. But what we have done, we've now developed an online resource. And that online resource is called Farming Food Steps. And we're aiming to put this on the school curriculum now within Scotland. And we've had an amazing uptake, not just the school sector, but also from butchers and other parts of the industry who really have embraced this. And this will go through the whole supply chain and try to educate people where their food is coming from. Young people now are born sustainable, with sustainability issues every day. If you go to a local school in Scotland, every kid will be able to tell you what their footprint, their carbon footprint is. And this is what we need to do to get into that same psyche. I certainly wasn't brought up with that, but that's what we now need to engage with going forward. And we're committed again this year to taking that resource and further developing it. We're also part of what we do. I mentioned earlier Scotland Food and Drink, and we work with them to put together our strategies. We've got a new strategy we're developing at the moment for the beef sector, and it's called Ambition 2030. And we've brought together all of the key players within the beef sector, and they will be working with us to make sure that between now and 2030 that we have a beef sector which is sustainable, a beef sector which is profitable, and a beef sector which has some of the highest quality products in the world. Second part of what we do is to develop the industry. And what we do to develop the industry is to really try to make sure that we have capability, not just in the farming sector, but also across what we call our footprint, that we have capacity and talent within that footprint, and how can we really drive innovation and demonstrate excellent practices. And we have a number of activities that we do to achieve that. We have a lot of industry data. We have a director of economics who is very well versed in all of the key areas. And what we do is we're producing regular reports that are used by the industry, not just by farmers and processors, but right across the industry. Also on our marketing side, we've now do the same on consumer research so that we have a knowledge bank that we can use of data, both on the production end and of what consumers want. We're leading on research, and we have a thing that we've called a Monitor Farm program. And this is where groups of farmers come together to learn both from industry experts, but also from each other. And where farmers will actually look doing an open book policy and sharing, information about their farm with others. We're moving into a new cycle with that, and we're currently developing a new program at the moment. And we're looking at a blended approach of using technology to deliver some of the learning, as well as having traditional face-to-face meetings. A major project that we've been working on is in relation to DNA within the beef herd, the Scottish beef herd. And one of the things that we've just completed a proof of concept study. And that proof of concept study looks at how we can trace back and identify what are the key markers that we can be identifying that will make the best eating quality experience. And our ambition is that we would actually have a complete DNA database, 100% of the Scottish herd within the next 10 years. We also now are trying to utilize technology much more than what we've done in the past. We're now developing mobile tools. We just launched one to optimize grazing. And regenerative agriculture is something which is really important to us now, and particularly from an environmental point of view. And we've also just completed a major piece of work on what we call sustainability benchmarking. And we're trying to benchmark what we're doing here in Scotland to the other countries across the world who are also selling into our target markets. In terms of our DNA project, we're trying to look at the genotypical markers, whether that's for health and welfare, but really to try and influence performance. And how do we get this information then back to the farmers so they can actually be producing it on a day-to-day basis on their farms? And increasingly, we're trying to look at benchmarking between farmers to show when we have really good examples of farmers doing well, how can we use the real data from those farms and use it to develop and influence other farms? So this year, key deliverables for us include the DNA project, as I mentioned, our sustainable red meat action groups, which particularly is looking at things that you can do on farm from a sustainability point of view, but how you can also use the natural resources to your best ability that you have as well. We also have quite a number of pigs in Scotland, and we do some very specific pig sector work. But another part of what we do is what we call meet the market. And what we're doing is we're trying to take people from different parts of the sector, and whether that's a farmer, whether that's the auction marts and so on, and then put them through and let them see what happens in the processor, in the abattoir, and see the technology that is actually used in the abattoir to try and increase the eating experience. And that learning then the farmers can take back on farm to identify what are the key things that processors are looking for when they're buying their animals. So the third thing that we do is to promote the sector. I mentioned earlier that Leslie will be giving us much more information on this in her presentation, but we've just developed a new campaign and we've called it Make It With Cred. And that is credibility. And young people here, apparently they have cred. Old people like me don't have that same cred anymore. But Leslie will give you a little bit of information on what we've actually done with this campaign, how we developed it, and the results that we've got from it. And then our routes to market, because we need to work with the supermarkets. We also need to work with butchers. And we have a thing called the Scotch Butchers Club, and we've recently rebranded it, and really trying to make sure that butchers within Scotland have a high quality brand as well. And it's not just the supermarkets. And it's not just in local markets, it's in our export target markets as well. As you're aware, because of COVID, we haven't been able to do the same number of international trade shows this year. And we're really hoping that next year we'll be able to build on all the work that we've done in the past, because quality meat from Scotland is certainly sought after across the world. The last part of what we do is to protect the industry. And I think this is how Veronica and I got talking in the first place. And on the left-hand side here, I'm showing you a telephone box in Edinburgh. And there's a poster on the side of it. And it says, eating animals contributes more to climate change than transport. Absolute rubbish. And this was put up by vegan activists all over Edinburgh. We were able to put a prosecution against them very quickly. But this is what is happening. We're getting this fake news all the time. BBC, the British Broadcasting Corporation, spent quite a lot of money developing this program called Meat, a Threat to Our Planet. And when we see things like this, we get very disheartened. But it also makes us very proud, because what we do in Scotland is so different from the things that the anti-red meat people are trying to get us to do. You know, I enjoy eating vegetables. I have many friends who are vegetarians. A vegetarian is someone who wants to eat vegetables. A vegan is somebody who wants everybody else to eat vegetables. And we need to be proud of what we have and the stories that we have, because consumers are also changing. They're wanting to know the provenance of their food, where it comes from, the number of air miles that it has, what is the name of the cow. It's amazing now what consumers are looking for. And from our point of view, we started this year having positive conversations about red meat. The sales of red meat in January, when people are trying to knock the industry, increased significantly here in Scotland. And the sales of plant-based foods did increase, but increased by a much smaller amount. So we have many challenges going forward. But as you know, not all meat is created equal. Here in Scotland, we are proud to produce meat with integrity. And that integrity is underpinned by all of the quality assurance that we do. Now, if I look at any industry over the years, you have to change. You cannot stay still. And farming is exactly the same. Just because your dad did it that way and your grandfather did it that way, unfortunately, it's no longer good enough. And we need as an industry to look at what is good enough. And there was a very nice saying said a number of years ago by Charles Darwin. It's not the strongest of the species that survive, not the most intelligent, but the ones who are most adaptable to change. Thank you very much indeed for the opportunity to speak at your conference today. And I'm more than happy to take questions. Thank you very much indeed.
Muchísimas gracias, señor Clarke, por su intervención. Vamos a dar algunos minutos para ver si más personas tenemos acá algunas consultas, pero recuerden que pueden, a los auditores, recuerden que pueden ir ingresando sus consultas al chat que está en la parte inferior de sus pantallas. Tengo una consulta, señor Clarke. ¿Cómo es la vinculación de Scotland con los gremios o asociaciones de productores que pueden tener diferentes visiones sobre la producción y comercialización de carne?
Can I apologize? I was hearing both Spanish and English there. I didn't hear the question in English.
Puedo disculparme porque estaba escuchando inglés y español a la vez. ¿Puedes repetir la pregunta, por favor, Verónica?
Sí, realizo la pregunta completa y de ahí mejor traducirla entera.
Ya,
¿Puede ser?
sí, es que yo pensé que estábamos en traducción. Sí, dale nomás.
Sí, no hay problema. Señor Clarke, ¿cómo es la vinculación de Quality Meat Scotland con los gremios o asociaciones de productores que están en el país y que pueden tener, por supuesto, diferentes visiones respecto a la producción de carne y a la comercialización de sus productos?
The question is, Mr. Clarke, is what is the link of the QMS, Quality Meat Scotland, with the providers and regarding on how you produce it and how you trade it and how you commercialize your meat? What is the link between you and the people who are commercializing your meat?
Okay. We are the custodians of the brands. And the brands that Quality Meat Scotland have are Scotch Beef PGI, Scotch Lamb PGI, and Specially Selected. So our relationship with the producer is to make sure that each of the producers work to the quality assurance standards that we set. And our role then is to give them routes to market and routes to help them sell their product.
Lo que él está diciendo es que ellos tienen las marcas y ellos son los productores, los custodios de las marcas de la carne escocés PTI, la porcina de Escocia PTI, también el ovino de Escocia PTI, y ellos lo entregan eso a los proveedores para asegurar que las normas que se cumplan con el aseguramiento de calidad, y eso asegura que ellos van a recibir estas carnes enriquecedoras a sus mercados y donde ellos quieren a los consumidores finales.
So a lot of our work is working with processors, abattoirs, working with retailers, working with butchers and chefs to encourage them to use our brands. And then also working with farmers to ensure that farmers understand what consumers are looking for and to make sure that to give them the best opportunity to get the best product as that route to market. That's a key for us.
Nosotros trabajamos juntos con los procesadores, con las casas de matanza, con los retailers, con los carniceros, con los chefs, y les aseguramos y les entregamos las mejores marcas. Y también les decimos a los productores qué es lo que los consumidores quieren, que ellos quieren el mejor oportunidades, las mejores calidades para que ellos puedan tener esto en sus mercados.
Bien. Nancy, hay una consulta que está en inglés, yo la voy a traducir, la voy a leer primero en español y de ahí la voy a leer directamente en inglés, ya que se agradece la gentileza de despertarla. En español, ¿cuál es su opinión o cuál es la importancia que usted otorga a la presentación de la carne en los locales o carnicerías donde se expende carne? How important do you see meat presentation in butchers' shops on meat sales?
Extremely important.
Extremadamente importante.
And we have recently recruited a new manager to manage our Scotch Butchers Club. And in the last 12 months, a number of butchers now have an online presence that they never had before the pandemic. And we are currently commissioning photographs and videos to try and really enhance their offer, not just because we provide marketing material for the butcher shop, but we also want to provide marketing materials for their websites as well.
Nosotros recientemente hemos reclutado a un gerente para el club de los carniceros escoceses, y hace 12 meses ellos ahora tienen un club online de los carniceros que no han podido tener antes, pero con esta pandemia ellos lo han podido hacer, y el QMS les envía fotos, les envía videos para mejorar sus ofertas y las marcas las marcas que ellos están haciendo para asegurar que ellos pueden promover esto en sus tiendas, en sus góndolas.
Bien, hay una consulta adicional. Don Rodrigo Muñoz consulta, ¿cuánto tiempo les llevó convencer a los productores que la asociación o la asociatividad es la clave de mejorar la calidad y la sustentabilidad?
The question is from Rodrigo Muñoz, and he is asking you, how long did it take you to convince the producers to be part of the QMS about the quality and the sustainability of what they are producing?
QMS was established by producers and by processors approximately 30 years ago. We have changed our name over that time, but we have never changed our commitment to quality. We're very lucky that we have an industry who is forward thinking and that they want to continually improve. Not everybody in the industry is that way, but the vast majority are. Also in Scotland, we have quite an aged demographic with an older generation still within farming. And every year that is reducing. And it's great to see the number of younger people and younger farmers who are coming into the industry. And we want to work very hard to try and get more young farmers into the industry as well.
QMS fue establecida por los productores y también por los procesadores hace más de 30 años atrás. El nombre ha cambiado a través del año, pero no los compromisos. Tenemos suerte de que nuestra industria siempre está pensando en el futuro, siempre quiere avanzar. No todos están de acuerdo, pero en final la mayoría están felices con lo que hemos hecho. Y en Escocia ellos tienen una demografía de edad donde en parte muchos de los productores todavía son personas de edad mayor, pero poco a poco están viendo cómo los jóvenes están ingresando y están siendo parte de los productores, y ellos quieren más y más comprometer a estos jóvenes para que lleguen a ser parte de la producción de carne.
Bien, para finalizar, tenemos una consulta con visión de futuro. Señor Clarke, ¿cómo visualiza usted el futuro de las carnes rojas en el devenir de los próximos años?
We're going to talk about the mission of the future, okay? What do you think? What, in your point of view, how do you see the meat production in the future?
A really good question. We have many people who now class themselves as flexitarian. They are reducing the amount of meat that they eat, but they want to enjoy the best quality meat. The last 12 months of the pandemic has shown that during times of crisis, people turn to things that they're comfortable with. Meat sales through retail in the UK have increased significantly in the last 12 months. And we're very confident about the future. We do have our critics, and we will have people from the anti-red meat lobby who will always be challenging us, whether it's on climate change, animal welfare, or human health. But I think that long term, people want to enjoy high quality meat. And I think the industry will have some challenges over the next few years, but I think we're well placed to meet those challenges.
Él dice que él está muy positivo en cuanto al futuro. Dice, hay muchas personas ahora que son clasificados como son más flexibles. Lo que quiere decir eso es que ellos quieren reducir la cantidad de carne que están consumiendo, pero a la vez ellos quieren disfrutar de una calidad de carne mucho mayor de lo que antes era. Y la pandemia les ha dado una muy altas ventas en los retailers en Reino Unido y se ha visto eso incrementando poco a poco. Así que él tiene un punto de vista muy positivo del futuro. Obviamente siempre van a tener los desafíos de los que están en contra de la producción de carne roja en cuanto nos dicen que nosotros estamos dañando el clima, pero queremos nosotros siempre producir una carne con alta calidad y así las personas seguirán consiguiendo y ellos están comprometidos a eso.
Bien, en virtud del itinerario, del esquema que tenemos para hoy día, queremos agradecer a nombre de la Corporación de la Carne y a nombre de SAGO profundamente al señor Alan Clarke por su completa presentación el día de hoy, por la generosidad de compartir sus conocimientos y la experiencia. Y sin duda alguna, esto es un excelente preámbulo para las charlas que vienen a continuación. No sé, Nancy, si quieres.
They're saying because of time, they're going to have to cut off the questions now, but they are very, very thankful for what you have presented today. And this obviously will be a very good starting point for what we will see the rest of the day. And they're very grateful for your presentation of today.
Thank you. Delighted to do it.
Gracias. Estaba muy contento de hacerlo.
Bien, y nosotros nos vamos a esperar solo un instante tras despedir al señor Clarke para volver en solo unos minutos más con la segunda presentación también de Quality Meat Scotland a cargo de Sarah Miller. Así que nos esperan solo unos segundos y ya estaremos de regreso. Muchas gracias.